June is the month that determines everything about your tomato harvest. Not July, not August. June. The decisions you make right now, how you water, how you fertilize, what you prune, what you ignore, set the trajectory for every tomato you are going to pick from now through the first frost. Get June right, and your plants carry you through summer with fruit you cannot keep up with. Get it wrong, and by August you are standing over declining plants wondering what happened. And the answer is almost always one of 5 mistakes made right now in June when the damage was still invisible. I am going to give you all 5 today, including number 3, the one that looks like good gardening, feels like good gardening, and quietly kills more tomato plants before August than any pest or disease on this list. Drop your US state or USDA zone in the comments right now. What I tell you today applies differently depending on your summer heat, your humidity, and how far along your plants are in June. I read every single comment. Let's go. Mistake 1. Inconsistent watering. Your tomato plant does not care how much water it receives in total. It cares deeply about how consistently it receives it. That distinction is the one most gardeners never hear, and it explains 2 of the most frustrating tomato problems in American home gardens: blossom end rot and fruit splitting. Blossom end rot looks like a disease. The bottom of the tomato turns black, sunken, and leathery as the fruit develops. Most gardeners assume a pest or a pathogen caused it. Neither did. Blossom end rot is a calcium deficiency, but not because your soil lacks calcium. Almost every American garden soil has adequate calcium. The problem is delivery. Calcium moves through tomato plants in water. It travels from the roots upward through the plant's vascular system, dissolved in the water the plant is actively moving. When your watering is inconsistent, wet 1 week, dry the next, then wet again, the calcium delivery system stutters. The developing fruit at the end of each cluster is the last stop on that delivery route. It gets calcium last and loses it first during dry periods. Black bottoms on your tomatoes are a watering consistency problem. Fix the consistency, and the calcium delivery fixes itself. Fruit splitting happens by the same mechanism from the opposite direction. A period of dry weather causes the tomato skin to stop expanding and begin to harden slightly as the fruit develops under moisture stress. Then, a sudden heavy rain or a day of heavy watering floods the plant with water. The fruit expands rapidly from the inside. The skin cannot stretch fast enough. It splits. The split fruit is vulnerable to disease and pest entry and rarely ripens usably. 1 dry week, followed by 1 soaking rain, or 1 soaking watering, can split every tomato on your plant that was close to ripe. The fix is straightforward. Water deeply and consistently. 1 to 2 inches of water per week delivered in 2 to 3 deep sessions rather than daily shallow watering. Deep watering encourages roots to go deeper into the soil where moisture is more stable and temperature fluctuations are less extreme. Shallow daily watering keeps roots near the surface where they are most vulnerable to the drying and heating cycles that create inconsistency. Mulch is the tool that makes consistent watering easier than any irrigation schedule. 4 inches of straw or wood chip mulch around the base of every tomato plant moderates soil moisture evaporation so dramatically that the gap between rain or watering events is extended significantly. The soil under that mulch stays moist far longer than uncovered soil. That moisture buffer is what your tomato's calcium delivery system needs to function correctly. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had blossom end rot and blamed the soil? Drop your state below. I want to know how many people watching this have been fighting a watering problem they thought was a disease. Mistake 2. Watering from overhead. This mistake feels intuitive. A sprinkler covers the whole garden efficiently. A hose held overhead gets everything wet quickly, and every single drop of water that lands on a tomato leaf in June is feeding the fungal disease that is going to kill your plant before the summer is over. Early blight, late blight, septoria leaf spot, These are the 3 fungal diseases that end more American tomato harvests than any other cause. They are all spread the same way. Fungal spores that live in the soil get splashed upward onto the lower leaves of the plant by water impact. From the lower leaves, they spread upward through the plant leaf by leaf as the season progresses. By August, the plant is defoliated from the bottom up, and fruit production has stopped completely. Every time you water from overhead, you are personally delivering those soil-borne spores to your tomato leaves. You are not just watering your plants. You are inoculating them with the disease that kills them. The fix is simple and permanent. Water at the base of the plant only. Drip irrigation is the ideal. Slow, consistent moisture delivered directly to the root zone without a single drop landing on foliage. A soaker hose through the tomato bed is the next best option. If you are hand watering, direct the water at the soil surface around the base of the plant. Keep the leaves dry. Keep the soil wet. That is the complete fungal disease prevention strategy that no spray treatment can replicate. If your plants already show yellowing lower leaves with dark spots, that is early blight already established. Remove every affected leaf immediately and dispose of them away from the garden. Do not compost them. The spores survive composting and return to your soil the following season. After removing affected leaves, spray remaining foliage with a diluted hydrogen peroxide solution, half a cup of 3% drugstore hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water, applied to every leaf surface in early morning. Switch to base watering immediately. That combination slows the spread significantly and buys your plant weeks of additional productive life. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. This channel puts out real zone-specific food-growing content every single week. What I just told you about overhead watering is something most gardening channels never address directly. Hit subscribe. It is free. 2 seconds. Mistake 3. Not removing suckers. This is the one that kills your plants before August. A sucker is the new shoot that emerges in the V-shaped junction between the main stem and a branch of your tomato plant. Left alone, it becomes a full additional main stem, with its own branches, its own flowers, its own fruit set. That sounds like more production. It is the opposite. Here is the biology that makes this mistake so destructive, specifically in June. In June, your tomato plant is making a critical resource allocation decision. It has a finite amount of energy being produced through photosynthesis every day. That energy has 2 possible destinations: vegetative growth or fruit development. Every sucker you leave on the plant is a new stem demanding vegetative growth energy. Every stem that plant grows in June is energy that does not go into the tomatoes that are already flowering and setting fruit right now. In June, when your plants are flowering and beginning to set their main crop of fruit, every sucker you leave is actively competing with that fruit for the energy it needs to develop fully. The result is smaller fruit, reduced fruit set, and a plant that puts so much energy into growing more stems that it exhausts itself before peak summer heat arrives. By July, the plant is oversized, underproducing, and vulnerable to disease because its energy is spread across too many growing points. Remove suckers weekly from now through July. Pinch them off when they are small, under 2 inches, and they come off cleanly with your fingers without a wound that needs healing. Let them grow large, and you create a wound that requires days to seal and creates a disease entry point. One exception. On determinate tomato varieties, the bush-type tomatoes that are labeled determinate on their tags do not remove suckers. Determinate varieties are genetically programmed to grow to a specific size, set their entire crop, and stop. Removing suckers from a determinate changes nothing about its production. On indeterminate varieties, the vining types that keep growing and producing all season, sucker removal is not optional. It is the management practice that keeps the plant productive through August and September instead of collapsing in July. Hit the like button right now. Every like tells YouTube this content is worth showing to American gardeners who are going to lose their tomato harvest this August to a mistake they are making right now in June. 1 tap. Mistake 4. Feeding nitrogen in June. You planted your tomatoes. They looked small and pale in May. You gave them nitrogen fertilizer and they exploded. Dark green, vigorous, growing fast. That felt like success. What it actually set up was a plant that is now optimized for growing leaves and stems instead of ripening fruit. Nitrogen is the nutrient that drives vegetative growth. Leaves, stems, size. It is the first number on every fertilizer bag. NPK, the N. In early spring before flowering, some nitrogen is appropriate to establish the plant quickly. In June, when your plants are flowering and setting fruit, nitrogen is the wrong input at the wrong time. A tomato plant receiving excess nitrogen in June produces exactly what nitrogen is designed to produce: lush, dark green vegetative growth. The problem is that energy going into producing more leaves and stems is energy not going into producing and ripening the fruit that is already on the plant. Over-nitrogenized tomatoes in June produce a characteristic set of symptoms. Extremely vigorous dark green growth, flowers that drop without setting fruit, and fruit that sets but ripens weeks later than it should. Switch to a low nitrogen fertilizer in June. Look for a formula where the middle number, phosphorus, is equal to or higher than the first number. Phosphorus drives flowering and fruit development. A fertilizer with an NPK ratio of 5-10-10 or similar, applied every 2 weeks from June through the end of the season, gives your plant what it actually needs during fruit production, not what it needed during establishment. If you already have extremely vigorous dark green plants with few flowers or dropping flowers, stop all nitrogen fertilization immediately. Let the plant's nitrogen levels drop naturally over 2 to 3 weeks. As the nitrogen level normalizes, the plant shifts its energy allocation from vegetative growth back toward reproduction and fruit set resumes. Mistake 5. Ignoring early disease signs. The most expensive thing you can do in your tomato garden in June is see the first signs of a problem and decide to wait and see if it gets better on its own. It will not get better. It will spread, and by the time it is obvious enough that waiting is no longer an option, the disease is already in every plant in your garden, and the window to stop it has closed. Early blight typically begins as small dark spots with yellow halos on the lowest leaves of the plant. Septoria leaf spot begins as tiny circular spots with dark borders and lighter centers. Both start at the bottom of the plant and move upward. Both are manageable in their earliest stages and nearly uncontrollable once they have moved into the middle and upper canopy. The window between first visible symptoms and uncontrollable spread is approximately 2 to 3 weeks in warm, humid June conditions. That window is the entire difference between a tomato harvest and a failed season. When you see the first spots on the first leaves, act that day. Remove every affected leaf. Dispose of them in the trash, not the compost. Switch to base watering if you have not already. Apply a preventative spray, hydrogen peroxide solution or diluted copper fungicide, to all remaining foliage. Then maintain a weekly preventative spray schedule through the rest of the season. Here is what most gardening content never tells you about tomato disease management. The spray is not the primary tool. The primary tool is removing the affected tissue before the spores on that tissue spread to the next leaf. The spray protects the healthy tissue that remains. Spray without removing affected tissue, and you are treating around a continuing source of infection. Remove affected tissue and spray, and you have actually addressed the problem. Here's the bottom line on all 5 mistakes. They all share one characteristic. They are invisible in the moment they are happening. The damage from inconsistent watering does not show up until blossom end rot appears weeks later. The damage from overhead watering does not show up until the blighted leaves emerge weeks later. The damage from unchecked suckers does not show up until the plant crashes in July. The damage from excess nitrogen does not show up until flowering stops. The damage from ignored disease does not show up until it is everywhere. June is the month when all 5 of these problems can still be corrected. July is the month when most of them cannot. That is the entire reason this video exists today, rather than in August when most gardeners figure it out too late. Subscribe right now if you have not already. Hit the bell. Drop 2 things in the comments. What state or zone you are gardening in, and which of these 5 mistakes you recognize from your own garden this June. I read every single comment. Your answers shape the next video directly. Fix these 5 things now. Your August harvest depends on what you do in June.